Well, thank you everybody for joining today. And my name is Linda D'Amore, and I'm the LIMS application scientist. And I'm joined today by Riz Shilikova, that is our sales and marketing associate, and by Feroz Shariz, who is our associate director of project management. And today we are going to deliver a webinar that is going to cover report and dashboards. We're going to cover the basic. I'm going to go through what are the benefits, why you should use them, where you can find them in Lockbox. And Riz is going to give you a demo, just introducing a little bit to the basic of creating a report and a dashboard. And we are going to have a QA session at the end, but please feel free to ask any question in the chat. Feroz is going to be the moderator of the chat, and we are going to reply to them at the end of the session. So what are the benefits of having a report and dashboard? First of all, is real-time visibility. So you could see all the performance that your lab is, all the data are in one place. You could take a data-driven decision. So you have all the data that you have produced every day in Lockbox, and you could just create a report that's that have all the information in one place. So no longer a spreadsheet that's been created and shared and maybe changed by one member of the team. They're all there in one place. You could identify any bottleneck or trends before it's too late and slow down your lab. And then you can have some customers inside. So you could see what you want, and it's not a preset report. You can create a report that is important to you, to your function within your lab. So we are always asked, do I need a module for a report? No, you don't need a module. You could use report with any module in Lockbox. So no matter which module you have purchased, you can basically access the data they are in the module, and you can create report and dashboards. Everyone can create a report, so you don't need an admin. You don't have to contact one. If you don't see the tab, Riz is going to show you how you can make that visible in your app. But no longer spreadsheet, no waiting. You are there. You are in the software. You can actually access your data and create the report that matters to you. It's really easy. It's click and point, and Riz is going to show you how easy it is in the next in a few minutes while she goes through the demo. And the whole team see the same data, of course, depending on the visibility and the permission that are set up for them, but you all see the same data set. What you could do? Well, usually you have generated a lot of data in your Lockbox, depending on how long you have been using Lockbox. Could be 100,000 or sometimes million. So you could filter the record for what is of interest to you. You want to see the blood samples that arrived today, or the one that were there in the last 3 years. You want to see which user has entered some information. You can report all of this really easily. You could group, summarize by status, owner, type, data. You can add charts that you can export, and you can also subscribe. So you just get an email in your inbox with all the reports or the dashboard. So how you could plot your data? You could have horizontal bar, vertical bar, line, pie, donuts, funnel. There is quite a variety. So it depends on if it's better you're reporting a dashboard, you could choose one of them. What you can configure, you can, as I said before, you can filter your data, you can grouping your data based on particular columns. You could use some filter logic. I want this account between this quarter, but not next year. You can decide whatever is the filter. As far as there is a field that represents a filter in Lockbox, you could use it. You could summarize, you could do some maths like sum, average, count. You can do some conditional highlighting. For example, you want to see all your sample that has TATs less than 2 days in green or in orange. You could pick the color, and that will be showing. You could, as I said before, you could use different chart and format for your dashboard or report. So a lot of things going on. So What is a dashboard? So there is a limitation in report. You cannot fit a lot of information in one report. So sometimes what you need for taking decision is not just one report, you need multiple reports. So what happened with the dashboard give you the ability to show different reports in the same place. So that will allow you to take a decision based not just on sample, but on a particular account or a particular procedure or process that happen in your organization. Is one way of see one big picture while you are also can go into small details. So what you need for building a dashboard, extremely easy. You just create your reports, then you create your dashboard, and then you add the reports to the dashboard. And you can have up to 20 components, and that's done. So you have a chart, metrics, table, gauge. You can basically use different ways of show your data. And Rhys is going to cover all of this in great details during our demo. So what you can display? As I said before, thousands of records, you can embed a chart, irrespective of security. So that means that if that person is not allowed to see the data, they will not be able to report on it or to show on a dashboard. You can export a dashboard as an image. You can send it by email, and you can subscribe. So you can also get in the same way you can get a report, you can get a dashboard. And as I said before, you can add up to 20 components to the dashboard. So we talked about this webinar as a learning journey. So today we're going to show you the basic. So how to create a report, how to create a dashboard. Rhys is going to also show some a little bit of advanced feature like creating a formula, but there is a lot more that we thought we could not fit in one particular webinar. So our plan is to have an intermediate and an advanced webinar coming up in fall. And you have seen now on your screen a poll to basically gather what are your needs, and if you'd be interested in joining in the next series of this seminar, that could be the intermediate or the advanced. So when it comes to advanced, what we mean with advanced, so there is a lot more feature that basically you can access, and it's all part of our basic report functionality, but you can create custom report types. So basically out of your Lockbox org, there are some normal, basically you can report on any object, but sometimes you would like to report across two objects. That is possible, but you need your admin to set up the custom report for you. There is cross-filter where you could find records with or without related data, for example, sample without aliquots. There is formula reporting. As I said, Rhys is going to show you some formula, but there is advanced formula that you could have in Lockbox. And then historical snapshots and reporting. So basically, there is the ability to collect your data at a certain time point and then create more reporting and dashboard based on this collection of data. You could join reports. So basically, you could see two reports side by side, and then you can subscribe and be sent that to you. There is also dynamic dashboard that allow you to adapt based on the view on who is viewing it. And I think Rhys is going to show some of that today. So there is some that we're going to hint today, but there is a lot more that it's available. And we would love to hear from you and see if you are interested in a more advanced seminar. And at the end of this webinar, we're going to run a survey, and you can leave your email and we can contact you and let you know about the date of the upcoming seminars. And so I'm now passing to Rhys. She's going to start the demo, and we are going to take Q&A at the end of our demo.
Wonderful. Thanks, Linda. I'm going to take that screen share. And I see lots of activity in the chat, which is amazing. And we've got two team members here, Jennifer and Feroz, who are going to be actively responding to those questions. So please feel free to keep the questions coming. Anything that we would actually like to show you that might be a good answer to the question, we can also do during the Q&A. So definitely stay tuned for that Q&A period where we're going to go into even more detail to answer these questions. But right now, I'm really going to spend the time showing you what dashboards look like, what reports look like, where you can find them, where you can put them in Lockbox. And then, of course, we're going to build a report with lots of different features. And then we're going to build a dashboard and add all the various components to that dashboard as well. And so, really, I do want to start by just looking at a dashboard and showing what that looks like in real life. And so, I quickly just want to highlight, the two dashboards we put together here for this demo. And I'm going to start with my lab operations overview. And these are just examples. So really we're just pulling data in from different places, projects, submissions, samples, but really any objects that you would use within your Lockbox LIMS instance, you can report on. So this is not what you're limited to, just an example here. And so on this particular dashboard, we've got lots of different components, and I'm going to go into lots of detail about all of the various components on this page. But just to quickly jump to our other dashboard here, we have our lab operations, and then we have quality. And so we thought these would be dashboards that have nice applications across lots of different industries. And so that's why we're showcasing these here today. And so those are our two main dashboards, but within them, as you can see, there's lots of different types of reports and tables and features. And so before I go into detail on those, I do want to ask a simple question, which is, where can your users see these reports and dashboards? Where can they access these from? And so, very simply, there is a reports and dashboards tab, and that's actually where you would go to build the reports and dashboards. Now, I've got those tabs right here, but I do want to highlight if you're looking at your Lockbox LIMS instance and you don't see them, that's not because they don't exist, they just might not be on your particular app. And so you can always navigate to these 9 dots over here. This is the app launcher. We can click there and you can simply search for reports. And if you were to click that reports item there, it would open up the reports tab for you. And so same goes for dashboards. If you don't see the tab, just navigate to the app launcher, search for dashboards, and you should see dashboards in the items. You can click that and it would open up the dashboards tab. You can add those tabs permanently as well, like I have here. And this is where you can see all of the reports and what you might have access to, for instance, because reports can be private or public. You can click New Report, and this is where we're going to navigate from to actually create our report. But same goes for dashboards, just to highlight there, we can see all our dashboards. You can see different folders that organize them, created by me, private, and then of course you can click New Dashboard, and that's how we're going to create the dashboard. But there is a few other places that we can put reports and dashboards to make them really accessible. For example, a home tab. You can see here on my home tab, I've got this projects by status reports, this submission by status report. Just to highlight, this is a bar chart. This is one of the donut types of reports. So we can just drag and drop these components onto something like a home page. We can also have the entire dashboard on these pages as well. So here we can see that lab operations dashboard, and we can click open to actually go into that dashboard in another tab. And same goes for another dashboard like our quality dashboard. So we can see those on the actual home page, or you can actually go and make your own lightning pages that have dedicated, for example, dashboards contained within them. And this is really nice because you can give them labels like Lab Manager View, for example, or Quality Manager View. And so that's another place that we can go and actually see these dashboards and reports. And one thing I want to highlight is really, Linda mentioned this, that there's a respect of the security model. And I think that's really important to highlight because let's say I'm the lab manager and I'm not supposed to see the quality manager dashboard, or vice versa. We have a quality manager who doesn't need to see the lab manager dashboard. We can use permissions, profiles and all of that role-based access control to define who can view these things. And I did just want to quickly highlight that. So I'm going to quickly go to Setup, navigate to my users, and just quickly log in as Jennifer, who is our quality manager. And what we're going to see is that I right now can see both the lab manager and quality manager tabs and dashboards. But when I log in as Jennifer, who has a different profile and a different set of permissions than me, we'll see how that view actually changes. So first, you might notice we no longer have the lab manager tab, and that's because Jennifer does not have access to that. I wanted to really explicitly show this by showing that Jennifer can see the quality dashboard, but if I were to click into the lab operations dashboard, it's not there. It still exists. I can still see it, but Jennifer doesn't have access. And that's just an example about how these permissions and profiles and all that role-based access control is respected in reporting and dashboarding. I'm going to log out as Jennifer and go back to my view here. And what we can see now is another place where we can add reports, which is on specific record pages. And so I'm going to click into this tab here, this accounts tab. And let's go to Acme Health, for example. And I'm on a specific record page. And this is applicable to every object. So I could have been on a sample record page, a project record page. And you can see here that I have a report chart. And what's very unique and I think beneficial about these report charts on record pages is they can be automatically filtered by the record ID. So this particular report, and I can click into it here, is actually reporting on every single account. And I can quickly just remove that filter there. And we can see that this report is pretty big. We've got lots of different accounts, all of the samples organized by their status. But when I went onto the record page, I'm only seeing the samples related to this particular account. And that is applicable across all the objects. You can actually have it automatically filter by the particular record that that report is being placed on. And so the one limitation here is we cannot drag dashboards onto record pages. And so that's really, I think, a quick little summary of where you can put these reports and dashboards and where you can find them. So there's lots of different places. Now I actually want to dive into the dashboards and look at the components before we go and actually build these things. And so here in our Lab Manager tab, and we're seeing our Lab Operations Overview dashboard, there's lots of components on the screen. So the first is at the top, we've got our label, and then we've got all these filters. And these filters allow me to actually filter through the data in this dashboard. And I'm the one who configured these filters. So I wanted them to show me filters based on dates. So the date we received samples, the date testing was completed, and then maybe even by account name, because I've got all of these various projects, submissions, and samples related to these accounts. And so just to show that, for example, maybe I only want to see samples that were received today. And so if I click that filter, we're going to filter through the data on this dashboard, and you can see that happening in real time. We only received 2 samples today. 4 samples that were received today are actually in progress, and one of them was actually completed. And so this is just a way of filtering through the data so that we're seeing things that match the criteria that we're looking for. We could also even sub-filter this and filter it by account, so you can apply multiple filters simultaneously, and you'll see how the data changes based on the filters that are being applied. And so I will refresh this and we'll go back to seeing all that lovely data. But before I go there, I do want to highlight
Oh
a few
yeah,
buttons.
absolutely. We could do that. Just
And so
ask Sia. She'll be able to pick someone.
oh, there we go. And so I can see all the buttons here. We've got a refresh button. So if we did want to refresh this dashboard, maybe we want to see that real-time data. I wanted to highlight another limitation, which is you can only refresh a dashboard once in a minute. So you do have to wait a little bit to refresh. And then I do want to highlight subscribe. This is really actually beneficial if you want to actively be viewing dashboards and reports. If I were to click subscribe, I can subscribe on a set frequency. So I could subscribe daily, weekly, monthly. I can set the time that I want this dashboard sent to me via email. And so let's say we wanted lots of people to receive this dashboard every Monday at 12 p.m. We can set that frequency. We can edit the recipient. So for example, let's say I want Jennifer to receive this dashboard, an email to this dashboard every Monday at 12 p.m. Now Jennifer is subscribed along with me, and we will both receive emails on that frequency, and we can even receive a screenshot of this particular dashboard showing that data at that particular time. So if you were to click download, and I will just quickly expand my screen share so we can see what that looks like. So I'll click download, and then we'll see how that downloads for us as, in this case, a PNG. So we're getting an image, a screenshot of that dashboard at this particular moment in time. And so that's the subscribe button. Like I said, I'm going to refresh this dashboard. Oh, and I actually wanted to reset my filters before I did that. And so now you're going to see all that lovely data that we populated here. And then I'm going to scroll down and show some of the components. We've got things like counters. So these are metric charts, and we're counting things like samples based on their status. We've got text that we can add. This is really nice for organizing the data in a dashboard. You can even add links. So maybe you want to link out to a list view and see a list of all your samples, for instance. You can add images. Here's an example of a logo. And as we scroll down, just to highlight, we've got bar charts, donut charts, funnel charts, line charts. We've got tables, and you can add conditional formatting so that, for example, we're calling out in red when a turnaround time is above a set number that we're looking for, a threshold, for instance. We've got gauges where we can see percentages like the percent of testing complete. And so these are all just the various report types and charts and tables that we can just drag and drop onto a dashboard. And that's what we're going to do in just a few minutes when we go and make our reports and dashboards. And so those are the main components of this dashboard. Another thing I want to highlight is that in any of these reports, we can click into them. So let's say I want to view more information about projects by status. I can click the link to view that particular report. And what's great about this is we can see the chart, but we can also see the table and all the data that's really behind this particular visualization. And so here we can see this table of data that I've put together. And another thing that's beneficial here is that if I click Enable Field Editing, I can actually go and edit some of this data. So maybe I need to change, for example, the start date. It wasn't entered correctly, and I'll move it here. And I can do that update to this data right here from this particular report. And so from a dashboard, we can not only see the reports and the tables, but we can jump into them and we can see the data and see that in more detail. I will just return to the dashboard here because when we are on a particular dashboard, and let's open this up for us, we can also edit it. And so if I were to click edit, we can see that I go to the dashboard editor, and this is all drag and drop, point and click editing. So I can move these components. Let's say I want to move this around. I can add additional widgets. I can add more filters, and I'm going to go into lots of detail on how to do this. I can rename it. So I'm just going to pause here though, and we're just going to dive now into a particular report just to showcase the features of a report as well. So let me dive into this submissions by status. We looked at the chart, we looked at the table, we've seen the field editing, but just to highlight a few things, a lot of the time reports have filters, as Linda mentioned. We can see those filters, and if those filters are already set on the report, we can actually adjust them. And so right now I'm looking at all submissions, but maybe I just want to see my submissions. And so I can apply that, and we'll see how that data changes because I've changed the filter criteria. And so that's filters there. We can also toggle the chart because maybe we don't need to see the chart. We just want to see the table. And we can change the chart properties. So right now we're looking at this donut chart, but maybe we think it's better represented as a funnel, for example. Or maybe we want to give it a chart title. And we can do lots of other things like show percentages, show values. So there's a lot we can do there adjusting the chart properties associated with this report. And then if we want to export a particular report, just like we saw we could download the dashboard, we can export the report. And in this case, it's going to export as an Excel file. And so just to show what that looks like, I'm going to go here and click export. And what I want to highlight here are two different types of exports. One is the formatted report. So this is going to have a header. It's going to have details on the filters we applied. And then there's details only, which is really just going to give us the table data. And so just to show what that looks like, if I click export, the system's going to export my file right there. And let me just quickly open this up for you all so we can just take a quick look at that. And there we are. And that's what our exported report looks like. And this was the formatted report, so that's why it's got my header. If it was the details only, we're really just looking at that table data. And so that is kind of the main components of what a report would look like. If we need to, we can also subscribe to these, just like what we looked at with the dashboards. And then we can also click, for example, add to dashboard. But what I wanted to click here was actually edit. And that would take us into the report editor where we can go and add additional columns to the table, group the data by a different quantity or multiple. We can add filters here and we can adjust the chart properties. And that's really what we're going to do right now. So we've looked at where we can find reports and dashboards. We've looked at the main components. Now let's go and actually build a report. And I'm going to try and build a report that's pretty comprehensive with lots of different details so we get to see a lot of these features in action. And so with that, I'm going to navigate to the Reports tab. The Reports tab is where you're going to see the New Report button, and that's what's going to enable us to create this report. And let me just, there we go. And so now I'm going to click New Report. And it's going to open up this little pop-up. And this is really the first decision we need to make, which is what are we reporting on? And so these are called the report types. And the report type, very simply speaking, it defines what objects we're reporting on. And that then defines what data we can pull into it, because that then gives us access to the fields related to that object. And so for this example, I was thinking we are going to do a report on samples, but more specifically, I only want to see blood samples, and I want to calculate their turnaround time, the average turnaround time for blood samples for each account. And so I'm really using that language specifically because each one of those things in that description is going to define how we're going to report on this. And so we want to report on samples. And so we would simply look up samples as a report type. And we can see right there, we've got our samples report type. And I could go and click Start Report. What I want to highlight though is that if you wanted to report on more than one object, you may need to make a custom report type. And just to highlight that here, I'm actually going to quickly show you accounts with samples. That was a custom report type that I made. And you can see here it's labeled as custom versus standard. And that will be part of our more advanced webinar series. If you do have any questions, feel free, of course, to ask and email us. But that is something we will touch on in that next upcoming webinar. But really, you will see that there are a lot of standard report types. So really, a lot of the objects are covered there. That is only for relationships that might have been custom. For example, connecting samples to accounts. But some of our standard reports actually do have multiple objects. So for example, samples with box ID. If I were to click into that report type, we'll see that we can see both the sample object and the box object. And what that enables us to do is we can see all the fields on sample. And if we continue to scroll, we can see all the fields on box. And that just means we can pull data from both of those. I'm going to focus in on just reporting on samples because we want to report on blood samples. So I'll go and type in samples. I'll select my sample report type and I'll click Start Report. So there's a few default settings that I want to highlight. First, because we're reporting on samples, the system has sample IDs populated as one of our columns. We can go in and we will go in and add lots of different columns to this table. But just highlighting one other default setting, if I go over to filters, this show me filter is automatically applied and it sets by default to just show you your records. These are records you are the owner of. We can adjust this to show just my team samples or, for example, all samples. And I'm going to click apply because I do want to see all samples. You'll notice here too there's a toggle, and this will allow us to preview the data that's going to be in this report. So right now we're actually not seeing all the data in the database, we're seeing a preview of the database. At any point we can click run and see the report in action, but we'll do that later. Another filter that's automatically applied is a date filter. So any date field will automatically be listed here, for example, that we can filter by date. This is default to showing all the dates of all time. So essentially it's null unless you go in there and actually specify a specific date range or customize a specific date range. So those are the default filters and the default column settings. Now let's make our report. So for this report, the first thing I like to do is set up the columns in my table. This is essentially defining the data that we want to see. And so I might want to actually see the customer sample name. So I simply search for that field, select the field, and then we'll see that column appear on the table. I also want to see the date that these samples were received, and I want to see the date that testing was completed. And so those are the four columns that I want as part of my table here. Now, looking at this, we wanted to calculate the average turnaround time. I don't have that as a column in this table. One thing you could do if you wanted to do a calculation like average turnaround time is you could go make a formula field, and that would actually be a custom field on the sample record, for instance. And that would look something like having, oh, here we go, a field called turnaround time. But let's say you're doing a calculation and you don't want to make a field for it. You can make just a custom column that has that calculation. And this would be a row level formula. And so I just click this little arrow here. I click add row level formula. And this allows me to create my own column that's not connected to a specific field. And so in this case, I'm going to call this turnaround time. And this will be in days. I will highlight we are going to go into even more detail on these row level formulas in our advanced webinar. This will be a simple example. So for my turnaround time, this is going to be a number, but we can select, it could be an output of a date time, or text. We can define the decimal points. So let's just say whole numbers. We're going for just days here. And then we have our formula editor. And this is just like the formula editor that you'd find when you're making custom fields. But what I want to highlight is that because we're reporting on the sample object, we have all the fields here for our sample object, and those can be inputs into our formula. For turnaround time, we're going to do the date that testing was complete minus the date that the sample was received. So we're going to do date testing complete, select that field, insert it. We're going to use an operator, in this case just subtract, and we're going to do subtract the date that the sample was received, insert that. And so we have our formula, that's our first date minus our second date. When we were preparing for this, Feroz had a great question, which was, what about weekends? We probably don't want those counted in our turnaround time. To do something like that, we'd navigate to the Functions tab, and you've got a whole bunch of functions that you can use to get some really complex calculations and logic. This is our nice and simple formula field. I can click Validate, and it says, yes, the syntax, the formula is correct. And then I can click Apply. And now we have our own column here calculating the turnaround time. And what's really important to include is that I wanted the average turnaround time. And when it comes to numeric fields, we can do calculations. And let's say I add another one here like volume. Notice that they're in blue. And that really tells you that if we were to click them, we can do these summary level calculations like sum. I actually want to do average. Maybe I want to see the max turnaround time and the min. And then when I click apply, if we scroll down to the bottom, those numeric fields have those summary level calculations displayed there. So just wanted to highlight that any numeric field, we can do those summary level calculations. And now I'm seeing the average turnaround time, the max, and the min. But the problem with this report is that it's reporting on all the samples. And I want to report on just the blood samples. And so then I need to filter. So I would go over to my filters tab and I would add a filter. We're filtering by any field. In this case, the sample type field. And so I just search for sample type and I have the field, the operator, and then the value. And so in this case, when we're thinking operator, I want the sample type to equal whole blood. But we can also choose not equal to. For things that might be numeric, you can use, less than, greater than. We can select multiple values, so it could be whole blood and tissue and serum. But in this case, I just want to say I only want to see samples that are whole blood sample type. And then I can click apply. And so now that is filtered through my data, I'm only seeing blood samples. And we can stack these filters. So maybe I also only want to see samples where the sample status is equal to testing complete. And then I can click apply. And so now we filtered even further. But what if we wanted to add some logic to this filtering? Well, we can use this little drop down here arrow and click add filter logic. And notice that this is similar to list view filters. So do we want 1 and 2 to both be true? Or is it okay if 1 or 2 are true? And then we can click apply. And that changes then how the filters are applied. And so that's filter logic. We can always remove filters if needed. We can remove filter logic and we can add more filters. So that really, there's a lot more we can go into for filters. Just to highlight one, cross filtering. This allows us to filter across related objects, but we're going to get into that in more detail in the advanced webinar. So coming back to our report, we have the average turnaround time. We have filtered by blood samples. But now if you think about this report, I wanted to see the data based on each account. And so really I want to group the data by the account. And so when you want to group data, you just go to group the rows and then you find the field that you want to group by. For example, we could group by status. That's one you've seen a lot in our examples. But in this case, I want to group by account. And then we can see here that I've now grouped it by account and I'm seeing those summary level calculations for each account. So for Acme Health, the average turnaround was 2, the max turnaround time was 2, and the min was 2 as well. But if we scroll down to Third Wave Analytics Health, we can see those summary level calculations are only applicable to the 17 samples related to that account. Another benefit of grouping is that enables charting. So before I added that group, notice I couldn't click add chart. And that's because I don't have anything to plot my axes, because essentially we just have a table here. And so we want to group by account. And now we can visualize that by adding a chart. And I can click add chart. And it's going to default to just this bar chart here. But if I click chart properties, I can select from any of the available chart types. So maybe I want to see a column chart. Maybe I want to see a donut chart. I'm going to go with column for this example. And if we scroll down, we can give the chart a title. We can adjust our axes. And so notice that because I had those summary level calculations, I could also have the largest turnaround time, the smallest, or even just the record count for the number of samples. So you can play around with what's plotting on each axis. You can say show values. We can add a reference line. So maybe our standard turnaround time is expected to be 1 day. And if I add that reference line, maybe I want it to be marked in orange, for instance. And that's just another way we can add to the visualization of this data. And so really here we've got our table, we've got our chart, and I'm ready to save this report. And so I can go and click save and run. And I have to give the report a name. So this is going to be my Reese example report. That's my creative name. And then from there, I can select the folder. So by default, it's going to say private report. So this might just be a report for me. But I can go and click select folder. And maybe we've got, a general company reporting folder like Lockbox LIMS reports. And I'll click select folder and then save. And because I clicked save and run, it's actually going to automatically take me over here. And now we're going to see that report in real time, pulling in not just a preview of the data, but all of the data. And so now we've got all of the accounts in the system, all of the data displayed here in this table, and we can see our chart and we can see those summary level calculations right there at the top. And so that's a look at how to create a report. Now you would do this as many times as you need to get all the different reports, and then you can go make your dashboard. And so I'm going to click over here to the dashboards tab, and we're going to click new dashboard. Now creating a dashboard is very simple. You just give it a name and select a folder. And so this is going to be the example dashboard. And then we're going to select a folder. I'm going to go with the Lockbox LIMS dashboard folder, and then I'm going to click create. And now our dashboard is made, but it has no components. And so to add something to the dashboard, we click add widget. And notice here we can add charts or tables, we can add text, we can add images. So quickly, I'll just add some text here. This might be, a header, for instance. Notice we can increase the text size, we can change the color, we can make it bold, we can add links. So lots you can do there with text. Once you add it, you can adjust the size. Notice it's all just point and click. We can drag it and drop it in different places. And then same goes with images. So you might want to upload an image or you might have some saved already in the system, like here's our logo there. And again, I can adjust the size, I can drag and drop, but the most important component is charts and tables. And so I could click Add Chart, and then I can see all of the reports. I'm going to go here to Recent because it's going to show me my recent example report, and I can click Select. And now when you're here, you can actually readjust the chart properties because even though I made it as a column chart, I can actually choose any of these various charting options. Notice here is gauge, here is metric, that's those counters, here's donut. We can even just display it as a table. Now, let's say you want to retain the chart. You can just say use chart settings from report and it'll just default to what was set up for the particular report. And same goes for if we want to display the table. Use table settings from report. And that just pulls the table, not the visualization. And so I'm going to go use chart settings from report. I'm going to click add. And now I've got my chart right there. And this can be adjusted. So, maybe I want this to be nice and long, so I can adjust the size there. I can add other charts and tables. So for example, maybe I want to add the table associated with this as well. And then I can click add. And so now I've got my chart and I've got my table. And you would just really at this point keep adding all the reports and charts that you need until your dashboard is complete. At any time you can click save. If you want to view the dashboard, you can click done. I'm just going to go and add one other component, which is filters, because maybe I want to filter through this data. Oh, look at that. Let's go back here, dashboards. Let's go to my example dashboard and click edit again. And so now let's add a filter by clicking add filter. And you have to filter by a field that is on at least one of the objects that's in the reports on your dashboard. And so maybe we want to filter by turnaround time. Maybe we want to filter by account. And just to quickly show account here, we can see the display name of the filter, and then we can add the filter values. So let's say TWA Health. And then we can click apply. That's now one of our filter values. Then we can add Acme Health and let's click apply. Let's just go with those two and click add. And so now we have a filter by account. And you can stack the filters as well. So maybe we want to do it by date, maybe date the sample was received. And we can add filter values. These can be specific dates or the relative dates like today, for example, maybe this month. And so these are standard functions and we can go and apply them and click add. And now we have additional filters. I'll click save. I'll click done. And just to show you how those filters in action, let's filter by Third Wave Analytics Health. And then it's going to filter our report based on that particular account. And I can then filter also by the date. With that, that really was a crash course. Like we mentioned multiple times, there's way more kind of advanced features. We can really get into a lot of detail on reports and dashboards, and that's why this really is a learning journey. So the next series in this webinar would be a more advanced look at some of those reporting and dashboarding tools. But our goal with this is that at least at this point, you can create reports, and you can create dashboards, and you can get started with the process of pulling your Lockbox data in and visualizing it and reporting on it. So I am going to stop at this point because we wanted to give about 15 minutes now for Q&A. I haven't looked at the chat yet, but it looked active. So
we are basically always announce our upcoming webinar on our LinkedIn, the newsletter. And so please follow us on LinkedIn and subscribe to our newsletter. As I said, we're planning one in fall, probably the first or second week of September. We are just looking at date this coming weeks. You can find here a lot of resources on our portal, more about all our guide on how you can, do some settings in Lockbox. Follow on our website, there are really interesting session where you find a lot of information, blogs. There will be an upcoming blog with more information about how you make reports and how you make dashboards. Release notes is where we always release our latest, where we always add information about our latest release. And if you follow us on YouTube, we also publish video where there are short how-to video that allow you to create views, list views, or add fields to pages. And and with that, I want to thank you all for joining us today. And it was a really nice and active chat. We will follow up with the question that we were not able to fully provide you with an answer. And thank you so much for your time today.
Yep, and I will be following up with everyone via email, so you'll get a copy of the recording and the slides as well. Thank
And
you,
please,
everyone.